to provide water for domestic use as well as small-scale irrigation systems. This has allowed families to grow crops and to have convenient access to water without having to walk long distances. This has the added benefit of providing nutritious food for children and generating income for very vulnerable households. In Bangladesh, surface water and rainwater collected from rooftops is collected and filtered and then injected into the saline aquifer. This creates a freshwater bubble, providing fresh water and the water is then collected by
Good afternoon from COP26 in Glasgow. My name is David Duncan. I'm the publisher of the specialist water news agency Uska News, which happens to be a Scottish company. I'm not very far from home compared to many of our visitors here this week. Hello to our physical viewers here in the room at the Water Pavilion in the so-called Blue Zone, and also to those watching internationally. This session has been some time in planning, engaging multiple partners. The Global Water Partnership, quickly, the International Secretariat for Water, the World Youth Parliament for Water, GWP Central and Eastern Europe, and my own organisation, Uska News, and others. Today our title is, we have from 2:30 to 3:30 UK time, today's choices, tomorrow's impact, youth action in the water and climate nexus. Paula, I think you have a little bit of footage that we're just going to show briefly as I continue my introduction. Right there. It would be remiss before we move on to proceedings for me not to mention that another youth and climate event is happening in Glasgow today. Greta Thunberg is a welcome visitor in Glasgow and Scotland during the climate conference, and today right there, maybe about a kilometre away in fact, she's holding one of her Friday school strikes, and certainly the numbers and the enthusiasm look really impressive. We thought you might be interested in that because it's youth and it's climate, and that's what we're talking about here today, albeit through water spectacles. Maybe we can fade that out now, Paula. I think we've just got about 40 seconds on a loop, and move on to our own group today. I'm here just to say hello. Our guide for the next part of the hour is Rihanna Gonzalez, who I believe is available online to take over from me. Paula, do we have Rihanna who's participating remotely? Hi, Rihanna. Welcome virtually to Glasgow.
Hi, David, and thank you for that footage. It was amazing to see what's actually going on the ground. It makes me feel really good to be almost there in Glasgow. So if we jump right to it, my name is Rihanna Gonzalez. I am the Water Resources Specialist for Youth Engagement at GWP. And as David said, today's session is on today's choices, tomorrow's impact, youth action in water and climate nexus. So we have a really packed session today. So we're just going to get straight onto it. And so our agenda for today, we will firstly have our feature speaker, and then we'll be followed by youth impact stories, a panel discussion with some distinguished guests live at Glasgow, a Q&A, and then we will close. So let's go straight to our feature speaker. And we have Dario Soto Abril, the current CEO and Executive Secretary for the Global Water Partnership. And he was also the previous CEO at Fair Trade International. His background is actually in corporate law, but now he is venturing into the water space, and we're very happy to have him here today. So Dario, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rihanna, and thank you all for having me today. As you see, my name is Dario Sotobril, young, because I'm still young at heart, and I'm not as young as others in the presentation, so I actually feel like a little bit of a young dinosaur. Happy to be here. I'm going to give you some statistics to start with, and it's difficult to compete with the images that were presented here before about the young youth groups protesting here in Glasgow, a few meters from where I am. But you know, more than me, over 50% of the population now is below 30 years old, and this population, or more than half of it, will inherit the burdens of my generation, the burdens that we are passing to you. And in this context, the decisions that are being made in COP26 will really be at the tipping point. Are we going to leave a better planet for you guys, for the youth generation? Are we going to leave something different? How much of this burden is going to be carried by you, the young people, the young generations? At the end, we know that youth are in the front line of the climate impacts, and also are pushing back, are fighting in different ways, which are quite energetic for us to see. One, we see that the work that youth are doing through advocacy, and again, we see the Greta and many young people, such as you guys, marching in different towns here in the UK, but also around the world, writing letters, pressuring the government. So it's this advocacy for change that is very visible. There's also the influence in policy, the work that we have young people embedded in country delegations, embedded already in the government, young people, activists, leaders in the private sector who are also here during COP, making sure that youth is also included in the policies, is also included in the decision making of the COP and in the decision making of the different countries. And we also have young entrepreneurs. As you know, it's not us now, 50, but the dinosaur. We're not the ones who are going to create more innovation. It's actually young people who are disrupting and bringing new things, new ideas. You know, the large corporations are being infested by young people who are coming and trying to disrupt with their own micro businesses, ideas from home, even working from their rooms, more powerful and a bit more visible, and more new ideas that could disrupt what the old companies would do. A much more pace, with no fear of failing, because young people now feel that failing is really a learning, and then you stumble and you move up, and that's how we are seeing these new innovations in water. But beyond that, we know that also young people alone cannot do it. And we know that my generation and past generation, older people we have contributed significantly to climate change. We're leaving you guys a world where we know we hope that it's not going to be doomsday, but we're living a world where there's pollution, there's corruption, there's slowness in action, and we know that to support you, the next generation, we need to do more, and we have a responsibility to leave the right resources in place, the right conversations, and also decisive action. So I can tell you a bit of what we're doing with the Global Water Partnership. We're really acting, and I have my colleague Rihanna, who's really the head and the face and the heart of everything we're doing with youth. And with her, we're implementing the new strategy for youth engagement, which is, we're committed to move really youth beyond the conversation into more creative decision making, making sure that youth are also influencing and being part of position of leadership within the global water organizations, but also in policy, in companies, in civil society organizations, in the networks also where we are operating. We also have the Global Water Partnership, the Youth for Water and Climate platform, which is something so cool that we're launching with the International Secretariat for Water, IWS, and where we hope that we're going to be able to provide an avenue for seed funding for projects that are created by the youth. I think that many of the ways that we can contribute to is to foster these new ideas by connecting youth with investors, by also providing some seed funding, and by making visible the youth stories and results that come from within the youth innovation. And this year also something that I think is very neat, is cool, is that we launched and we started the Water Youth Academy, or the Water Youth Academy for Youth, through which we already have engaged more than 200 young leaders across the globe in areas related to water management, innovation, entrepreneurship, advocacy. And what we do is try to connect them so that they don't feel they are isolated in their own communities, and but that really we are creating a global network of these young leaders through the Youth Academy. And from a decision-making point, we are trying to, at the Global Water Partnership, include young professionals and leaders in our highest decision-making bodies. So recently we engage, or we open up in our steering committee to have one youth representative, which is very, very nice, because it gives us the window to hear what the voices of youth. And actually this youth representative is actually now our vice chair, Jamila from the Caribbean. So it's good to have not only preach, we don't only preach about how important youth are, we're actually very active in involving youth in our governance bodies. So there's a lot of the actions that we're doing right now, and I want to encourage you and maybe leave you with a small history about my own past. When I was 19, the age of many of you, my country, Colombia, were going through a middle of a war, and drug traffickers were putting bombs and killing people all over the place. And at that time, that was 1991, 30 years ago. Youth, my generation, youth, my age at that time, 19, we decided to take over the country, while organize big protests, influence the government. We paralyzed the country, and we forced, nicely, of course, the government to pass a new constitution, to get all the political parties together and find new ways in which the country would go into a path towards peace and prosperity. And I'm telling you this story because then along the way, you lose a little bit. When you get older, you lose a bit of, and that's when you're north in terms of activism. And that's my face when Rihanna said that I was a corporate lawyer. But now that I'm 50 again, I think that we need to recover, and I feel very engaged with this because I need to recover this youth spirit, this fighting lightning, and I think that we also need to encourage you guys to take this pass the torch to you, because you are going to be the ones who are going to face the real hard problems that we are leaving you. And I'm sorry on behalf of my generation, but we are very hopeful that you guys can make the world change. Maybe we can give you a hand. Maybe we can try to leave you a better, less complicated world. But now, really, guys, this is up to you. And you are not only the future, you are the present. So I hope that the conversations that we're having here in COP get you inspired enough so that you take even more decisive action, and you come with more disruptive innovations that would allow us to leap to the next level in terms of climate change and adaptation and mitigation. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the discussions that we're going to have in these panels today. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Dario. I did not know you had such a fighting spirit background history, so really happy to probably hear a bit more on that story. So great to hear. I do appreciate your speech, your address that you gave us, and thank you for recognizing the need for support for youth and identifying that GWP is also walking the talk. We're not just saying things, we're actually doing things. So in terms of doing, we're going straight into our video segment where we will see the youth that are on the front lines of doing work where they are building resilience between climate and water. So our first video, we have Shensu Project. This is a project that occurs in Ghana. under the Ghana Youth Environmental Movement. And this was one of the projects that was funded under the Youth for Water and Climate platform that Dario mentioned earlier. So let's see what it's about.
Ever different traba letting Yagoma. Yabana Jujumedo, I'm Panachi crow. Lemba of Mianu, Gichi Janamia, Afimia Pochi Anu. Sia Kanamina, Wapper, allow a bow, plan Yukata, no, Anum, Aba, enough for the Rami, Le Ducama.
My name is Gloria Ejare, Programs Officer for Ghana Youth Environmental Movement. The name of this project is Chensu, which comes from the Akan language, and it means share water. The objective of this project basically is to provide clean water for everyone, people living in urban Accra who are from low-income communities. To be good caretakers of this water kiosk. The reason why we are undertaking this project in Treba is that Treba has been faced with water issues since it's been years. And we also realized during our research that Treba only has access to 2 sources of water, which is the stream water and then rainwater reserve. So we realized that young children walk over a kilometer just to get access to clean water. So we saw the need to have this project here in this community in Accra. In this project, we involved the chief, we involved the Treba Youth Association leader, and then we involved the assemblywoman, and we involved the youth in the community as well.
Chifanya anofudana mila amewa katala Treba. Aba chifiaki kuna chira the part wakana oku aba kukarefi makpo aba chikharefi ma fi bana kuku agba otorama la pri eni pri ogbo kata bana chanu ya gboto ha mila chanu tama na bi fampa le Treba no cho chifanya nti ta na ba garama kro ha iba yere council ufonu vivi cho chifanya nti aba kemia de mila du kwama no ta makwaba chinya hina mi kata kule le dukama msema unachi na nkanze chinuga de bi chinuga mchicho chinuga ochichoga anyanu ochichoga adanu ochichoga nu akemio yala awo ngba kule la kata ko le chire kaza skaka do le very crowded ta faro vai ma bring us akra ba fia le chi nyi manuta akamba opamanu va de kama gaba alio ta baru garama crowd to sanvonami mi akọ atwochi afi anonunu adokra we mi aba no cheda afi anonunu obo mi aba amilena yunu na chima o mamio papa mgo afi pure water aba dogo fia ofuda obo gamali wakono pure water ajema kono echi enumo pure water eja kafra atami akamata chokchoga allo ko allo fuda na mi amoyala Treba dukama yechinya titri la dukama nami fuda na impa.
Wadre ha gadura edemi aje vivina mi ba fifia tu va mi agbo afi ke mi va ekuna chira didita fifia mi adoduna be tu va telemi anti yenya amne mo to ko mata to bucket ko ayila fiko ava ikuchi ko ava kole nye gazemo ko ko mo ludo joji aro agwo nya pomo do aku anyanya ha aku ko akonya adoduna mi pa ba mi pele mi anti ba nu yo kata esia va mi agbo.
Donc, je suis Yehowa. Mi favia, c'est pas fafa. Ya auto mi aja mi ko chiko banami. Chensu Gia Ghana Environmental Youth Association to ogbo covenant movement covenant ade jonami. Ta kwa wi fi mi akpojijo. Mi aza echinwi to yakonyanu akodanu anu hapo ha. Ta mi apa ga mi akoda kono pure water jama. anu adidi na mi ha ta mi kwa jujore mi anti pa mi pa do nya va wana mi ta.
Going forward with this project, we will be working with a 7-member water board, where we have 4 ladies on board with 3 men. They will be checking the day in and day out activity of the water kiosk and run it smoothly, and also maintain the structure and also expand with time. This is just to achieve or meet the SDG goal 6, clean water and sanitation in low-income communities like Treba.
So thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely inspiring, the work coming from a youth organization that spanned and evolved into actual water management within that small community. So that was one example of youth creating innovative solutions in a community. Now we're gonna go into more of the advocacy space, and we have Nikki Becker, Sanitation and Water for All Youth Champion from Colombia.
Hola, mi nombre es Nikki Becker, soy una de las fundadoras de Jóvenes por el Clima Argentina, que es un movimiento social y ambiental que justamente hace campañas con el cambio climático, pero desde una perspectiva latinoamericana y siempre poniendo en el centro los derechos humanos. Soy activista ya hace más de 2 años y aunque hay muchas preguntas que todavía no sé las respuestas, hay algo que tengo muy claro, y es que el clima es el mayor reto de nuestra vida y afecta a todo, desde la economía, la salud, la alimentación e incluso también la alimentación. También tengo claro que primero vamos a tener que empezar a hablar del cambio climático y relacionarlo con otras problemáticas, como por ejemplo con el agua. Así que es urgente que empecemos a establecer esta conexión. La mitigación del clima tiene que empezar desde un enfoque inteligente del agua y también del saneamiento. Este año también estoy trabajando como campeona de la juventud de saneamiento y agua para todos para influir en las acciones de los responsables de las tomas de decisiones. SWA es una gran oportunidad para que justamente los y las jóvenes seamos escuchados por las personas que hoy toman las decisiones en la esfera política y también financiera. Creo que hay muchas lecciones desde el activismo juvenil por el clima que podrían servir para el agua y el saneamiento. La primera es que el cambio climático no es una cuestión de números, no es una cuestión de estadísticas, no es una cuestión de proyecciones, es una cuestión de derechos humanos. Creo que los activistas juveniles pueden tener todo el éxito en hacer esta conexión y tenemos que humanizar al agua y el saneamiento, llevarla más allá de las tuberías, de los retretes y mostrar a la gente cómo va a afectar su presente, pero también su futuro. Si todo el mundo entiende esta conexión, vamos a conseguir involucrar a mucha más gente en nuestro movimiento de la que tenemos ahora. Tenemos que argumentar urgentemente por qué debemos prestar atención al agua y al saneamiento ahora. El COVID-19 nos demostró la urgencia de hacer realidad el acceso universal al agua y al saneamiento lo antes posible. Y por último, debemos apoyar a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, a los movimientos y las organizaciones juveniles. Tenemos que crear el entorno adecuado para una participación que sea significativa de los movimientos de base en este debate. Incluso si estos movimientos te dicen cosas que no querés escuchar, si te critican a tus donantes y gobiernos. Es hora de escuchar y encontrar un terreno en común. Ahora en la COP26 tenemos la oportunidad de cambiar la historia. Pero para esto tenemos que ser lo suficientemente valientes como para imaginarnos un futuro distinto y contar una nueva historia. La lucha por la acción climática y por dar prioridad a los derechos humanos, como el derecho humano al agua y al saneamiento, está obligado el mundo a enfrentarse a todos sus efectos conectados: racismo, pobreza, desigualdad de género y consumo excesivo. Pero también nos está animando a construir un mundo mejor, que sea más justo y ambientalmente más sostenible. Gracias.
Thank you from Nikki, and I think she really gave a good message in her video there. So just to keep with time, we will now move on to, I will ask my colleague Jerry to speak on the national youth dialogues that have been occurring in Central and Eastern Europe, speaking to youth being involved in policy and governance. Jerry, over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. GWPC has launched a new initiative this year to support youth in integration with decision-making processes and give them more space to realize their ideas for a sustainable future. The outcomes were in form of project ideas that will be considered for developing and submitting to Visegrad funds. Coming up, 3 representatives of 3 countries will share with you the results of their work so far, starting with Andrea Giurgiu with the outcomes from Romania. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. If you can just, the first. Thanks. Let's hope no one's snoozing right now, because I'm about to tell you how we can reverse the 6th extinction. Next. Okay, so the lacking of a volunteering culture within environmental protection institutions in Romania is significant, and it creates situations where citizens are undereducated on the subject. Next. Thanks. So we aim to address the lack of knowledge by creating targeted awareness campaigns. We also want to bring key leaders in the field and create consistency, thus enhancing the institutional capacity with youth by capitalizing on the legislative framework and the participation of volunteers in environmental protection institutions, respectively law number 78 from 2014. Next. So we are currently in the middle of the 6th mass extinction on planet Earth, as we all probably know. Next. In 1954, we still had 64% of biodiversity intact. Now in 2020, we have less than 35% of wilderness left. Next. Food forests meet the requirements of 12 out of the 17 SDGs. Basically, if everyone would plant a food forest or a tree guild in their backyard, we would be able to reverse the 6th mass extinction in a matter of years, because permaculture is by design natural carbon sink machine. Next. Okay, so at this point in time, we need food forests as much as we need the air that we are breathing. So if we want to survive as a species beyond the next couple of decades, we should make the link and take action. Now I'd like to give you a quote I really like from Bill Mollison. And that is, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. So the takeaway message is, let us work together and be our own heroes, because only together we can make our short time on this planet mean something for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We are now moving to Slovakia, and Kristina Sabova will now introduce us with her input.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. Glad you are here. I would like to introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Kristina Sabova. I'm from Slovakia, and I work as a specialist of meteorology and climatology in the Slovak Hydrometeorological Institute. I reacted to a Global Water Partnership Central and Eastern Europe's project, which name is 10 Years for a Greener Future. And with my colleagues, we discussed about the potential themes, and we got the following results. So the most sympathetic themes was for us the national and regional policies, because at the end of August in this year, the government of Slovak Republic approved the document action plan for the implementation of the climate change adaptation strategy, which defines measures requiring implementation in the short terms as well as the medium terms. It also contains a proposal for a vulnerability monitoring system, a proposal for a system of midterm evaluation of the adaptation processes in the conditions of Slovakia. So the individual measures need to be applied to smaller territorial units up to the level of towns and municipalities. Here it would be necessary to select a specific objective and purpose its fulfillment for a certain area of specific measures. So that's all about our topics from my side, and thank you very much this attention.
Thank you very much, Christina. Last but not least, Judith Palatinos will enlighten us with the results of Hungarian youth dialogues.
Hi everyone, my name is Judith Palatinos and I work for the Middle-Tisza District Water Directorate as a project manager for 3 years now. And me and my colleagues prepared the Hungarian National Dialogue about the water governance and the youth inclusion within the water sector, since because we realized that there is a clear lack between the high decision makers and the youth within the communication. And there are many reasons for that. Could be political, managemental, etc. But we think that it's because that we don't have a surface where we could share our ideas or where we could hear our voice. And we even prepared a survey to find out what other or younger co-workers think within the water sector about this topic. And it showed that around 35% of us youth is involved within decision-making processes within the water sector in Hungary. And the ones who would like to get involved is the opposite number. More than 60% of them would like to get involved. And for this, we had an idea that we could create a surface, like an online platform or website where we could reach the high decision makers, or they could reach us by asking about project IDs or proposing project IDs, and we could upload our IDs. And we also found out that this water management sector is not that attractive yet for our generation because of salary, of course, and because there is not, it is not a highly valued profession yet, but it could be better and we could make it better. And I hope that one day we will have better communication with the decision makers, and maybe we could also share all of our ideas and to make all the water governments better, not just in Hungary, but in all Central Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. So thank you to all our representatives. The ideas that you shared with us are truly inspiring, and we will be trying to realize as many of them as possible. As for the audience, if you would wish to meet with our representatives, visit Hungary during the Planet Budapest event, where we'll be further expanding on the results of our dialogues. So thank you very much, and back to you, Rihanna.
Thank you, Jerry. And they were quite inspiring, especially coming from a different perspective in terms of building into policy and using projects to create change policy. So it's great to hear from that. So now we're going to jump straight into our panel discussion, which would be live at Glasgow. So I'm going to hand over to our amazing moderator, Alex, who will take us through the next segment of this session. So over to you at Glasgow in the Water Pavilion.
Thank you very much, Rihanna, and hello everyone. Welcome today to this discussion on youth, water and climate and the Water and Climate Nexus. I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you all about the Water Climate Nexus today and interview some really fascinating guests. I think David really set the scene well earlier today, talking about just how different the approach to addressing water and climate can be from one young person to another. We have people talking and negotiating here at COP26, and we have really important young people outside COP26 right now marching for Fridays for Future. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And let me just quickly introduce each of our speakers. As I call out your name and read your bio, would you mind coming up to the stage? Firstly, we have John Firth, Senior Director of the Climate and Resilience Hub for Willis Towers Watson. John has nearly 30 years experience in assessing the impacts of climate change, overlapping with 28 years in the water sector. He has a particularly high expertise in the impacts of climate change on SMEs, multinational corporates and their supply chains, and the financial services sector. He's also quite active in TCFD, a very interesting topic, very important at COP26 in particular. There's a microphone for you, John, thank you very much. And he has worked extensively on country national adaptation plans, developing the linkages between non-state actors, government, politicians to create shared agendas for policy reform. Thank you very much for joining us, John. Next up, we have Hasmik Barsegyan, President of the European Youth Parliament for Water. Apologies, Hasmik, if I've butchered your last name at all. I'm really happy to see you again. I've worked with Hasmik before, as I am the former Vice President of the World Youth Parliament for Water. Hasmik is a water and climate action advocate. She raises youth voices on European and international platforms in favor of the sustainable and democratic management of resources and protection of the environment. She is the president of the European Youth Parliament for Water and a board member of the International Secretariat for Water as well. As well as that, she's also the co-leader of the Youth Engagement Platform at the United Nations Global Water Quality Alliance, and she's currently also a party delegate at COP26 on behalf of the Republic of Armenia. So you may notice there's a bit of a pattern developing here where our speakers wear many hats simultaneously. Next up, we have Georgette Keane. Georgette has a background in communications and video developing, but she's also currently the youth empowerment focal point at SIWI. She's passionate about achieving an inclusive and just future, and in her work as the youth empowerment focal point, she advocates for the rights of young voices throughout our projects and processes. Thanks for joining us. And last, but certainly not least, we have Nikita Shirol. Again, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your last name, Nikita, who delights in the title of Eagle Ray Empress. I spoke to Nikita about this earlier on, and she believes that everyone has their own superhero name that empowers them and encourages them to do the work they do and achieve great things. So it's great to have you here as well today, Nikita. Her purpose in life, self-described, is to spread ocean love. Nikita founded Young Marine Explorers, a Bahamian organization committed to conservation and youth development, and she's the owner of the Cat Island Mermaid, a conservation art and wellness business, and Ocean Soul Farm, a hydroponic startup exploring food security solutions. Nikita is also attending COP26 as a party delegate of the Bahamas and represents the Caribbean Climate Change Youth Network as a UNESCO partner. So, a fantastic panel for us to discuss this youth and water and climate nexus today. So I'm going to jump straight into things, because we have a very short amount of time. We have about 20 minutes to cover a lot of ground here. And I'm going to ask a question to all of our panel, which I would like to ask each of you to respond in turn. Do make sure you share the microphones, as I'm not sure everyone has a microphone. So, as I mentioned, Fridays for Future is happening right now outside. I would like to know, based on the scene that was set by David, the diversity of youth that I've discussed myself, what's your opinion of these types of movements, such as Fridays for Future, and how can they make a significant impact in the global decisions such as those that will be made here at COP26? We'll start off with you, John.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think just to put the context, first problem is I've got a bit of an issue with talking about youth. I think it's young people. The problem with using the word youth, it makes it sound as though you don't have rights, you don't know, you don't have knowledge, and that's just not true. In fact, my experience is most young people have far more knowledge about climate change than people of my generation and perhaps the generation below me. You are very, very knowledgeable, and that's really important. And I think thinking of yourself as young people rather than youth, it's also about you have rights and you need to exercise them, you need to collectivise, you need to organise. Don't be put off by other people's views. The problem as you get older is you get institutionalised. You know, you think the way your organisation or your employer thinks. And those institutionalised views actually get in the way of thinking differently. When we look at climate change, it's my generation and the generations before that, we have caused these problems. And when we are institutionalised, we will think about the ways to solve these problems, thinking of old traditional ways. But actually, we need very open minds. We need young people who are not fettered with these institutional thinking to challenge perceived wisdom and actually act differently. That is absolutely crucial. We cannot solve the climate change crisis, biodiversity crisis, poverty, a whole host of other issues represented by the Sustainable Development Goals. We cannot solve them by traditional thinking. So don't be put off and challenge, and don't accept no for an answer. That is my fundamental message. Greta Thunberg, I think it's a year, 2 years ago, talked about, she gave a very passionate speech and talked about, I don't want people to keep saying, I'm a great resource for the future. It's your problem, you solve it, then give me the world I deserve. Well, unfortunately, we are not going to be able to do that. So it's your generation, the young people of this world, will actually make the changes that are happening. We can do so much in the time we have left, but we are not going to deliver this now. We've left it too late. So be very, very forceful. Don't take no for an answer. Act.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John. That's a really great reminder of how powerful youth can be. And Hasmik, what's your opinion on the movement such as Fridays for Future and the impact they can have on the decisions at this high level, like John touched upon?
Thank you very much, first of all, for hosting me here. I just want firstly to remind you one of the important statistics that have been published recently by the Lancet, the famous Lancet scientific medical journal. So according to Lancet, 3 out of 4 youth find their future frightening. And it is the statistic globally. So from India to Australia, Philippines, Brazil, Portugal, youth are not sure about their future. According to the World International Forum, the youth disillusionment is one of the risks for the future and for this year. So now our future that everyone says, all the organizations, decision makers, they call youth. These youth are not sure about their future, and one of the issues is climate change and their concerns about for the environment. So about Fridays for Future, I think all the means of fighting for this sustainable future are legitimate. Being on the streets or being on this panel are legitimate. Other youth on different parts of the world, they are launching statements calling to decision makers to take bolder legislations for that are based on science, like the World Youth Parliament for Water with other youth around the world. So it's very important to fight, and all the means of this fighting are legitimate, and we need to support them. You know that, Alex.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Hasmik. That's really, really important words to hear. And I think it ties back to what John was saying about how young people are having the courage to step up and speak up and make change now. And realize they can't just wait around for action to happen. Thank you very much. And Nikita, your thoughts, please.
Thank you. I first want to say it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share my voice as a younger person from a big ocean nation, also referred to as small island developing states. I find this is a very interesting question. I'm going to start by saying I think we all do the best that we can with what we have. And I think for some people that means they show up on the streets. And I really would like to presence that as a younger person who's speaking on behalf of youth throughout small island states, it's not for our future, it was for our yesterday, and it's for our today. And I think often the message can get lost. Fridays for Futures forgets that there are people, like my people were washed out to sea 2 years ago, and other peoples, indigenous peoples, like it's our today, it was our yesterday. And so while I encourage our voices to be used and for young people to act in the best way possible, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, especially those who have access to this, there's a huge amount of people who are mobilized and using their voices, but I think now is the time that we transition that into action and to give these young people clear actions so that they can truly advocate for the millions of people whose lives are on the line. And I understand that this is what, we have to protest. Some of the greatest movements in our time and our history has been seen by people going out onto the streets. And I think we get to do better. And I feel like now it's really about how do you use all this passion, all this energy, and translate it into concrete action that's not just for a future that may happen one day, but it takes into account what's happening today, what happened yesterday, and the change that truly needs to happen. Thank you.
Brilliant. Perfectly put, Nikita. I don't have anything to add to that. That was fantastic. Thank you. And Georgette.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for the question. I think to avoid echoing the amazing things that my fellow panelists have said, I'll answer the bit about how they can impact global decisions, and I think I would just remind everyone that the people that can impact the global decisions are the people that are in the room when those decisions are being made. So we also need to look at who is being invited into those rooms, and not just to add a speech or an intervention, because they are temporary interventions. They last for a few minutes. We need people to be involved in this process from when delegations are choosing who to take with them, and they look at their staff and there's already young people there for them to bring with them. So I think we really also need to look at who is inside the room making those decisions, because it's them who has, at this moment in time, the greatest impact on the decisions that are made.
Brilliant. Thank you. So it's very interesting to hear each of you approach the question in a slightly different way. But of course, we all come back to the point of having youth involved in decision-making processes and having youth actually holding the power to make the change that they need for their own future. COP26 plays a really big role in that. And the next question I'd like for each of you to address before we jump into some more specific questions for each of you is, how do you feel that young people and youth has been dressed at COP26 itself? Today, of course, is Youth and Civil Society Day at COP. And I think I've noticed a much, can I say, rowdier crowd today. There's been a lot of cheering. There's been a lot of chanting as I walked around the pavilions. That's my personal perspective. But starting with John, how do you feel it's been addressed at COP26? And we'll go down the line again.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to several COPs over the years, and this COP does feel differently for a whole variety of reasons. But it is very noticeable that the age group of COPs has changed quite dramatically. When I first went to COP, everybody was in their 50s almost, and they were white and they wore suits. It was very typical senior management type views, except for some of the NGOs. But now what we're seeing is, just look around. People are far younger. There's far more new thinking coming in, and it's got to be encouraged. The slight fear I've got, and it will be overcome, is that this issue of tokenism, that people think, well, we must have a young person on the panel to demonstrate we're taking this seriously. But are they really using that young person to actually really contribute to decision making? So I think it's just a careful comment that everybody, when asked to go on a panel or talk to someone, just check, do they really want to hear you, or are you there just to make them look good? Because otherwise, don't go.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Hasmik, your opinion on the integration of youth into COP26?
Thank you for the question, Alex. So, first of all, when we analyze this movement of youth on different parts of the world, these movements are, first of all, a demand, and on the other hand, shows their commitment. So that young people are ready to participate in the solutions and into the project. So it's very important for the meaningful participation of youth to give them the responsibility for the future, for the present. So in that case, we will have meaningful participation. If not, we will only stay on the level of consultation. That is not enough. If we want to have real participation of youth, we need to involve them in the project and into the solutions.
Thank you very much. And also, I think you just reminded me that there are several youth declarations going around at COP26 this year. I think more than the usual number. There are many, many youth organizations that have all organized together and put forward declarations to be included in the final decisions of COP26. So it's definitely a trend.
Yes, exactly. From the World Youth Parliament for Waters, their statement to Conference of Youth, the statement by Jungo and other youth, as well as the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition. This big group of youth who participate also to pre-COP sessions, many other statements.
Brilliant. So maybe our audience can go and seek those out if you're interested to hear more about youth opinions on climate and water. Nikita, your voices, please.
Thank you. I often believe that youth participation is tokenism. I say this as having been a youth, and I'm at that age where I'm kind of migrating out of the youth space and into the full adult space, if you will. But with that being said, I think it's extremely important that youth must be integral to the entire process. And it's not just tokenism. It's not just having a young person on the panel, but it's about the younger person co-creating and being an equitable participant in the entire process. And this is not something that we're seeing. I think often the youth involvement is very rushed, and they're not given enough time even to truly conceptualize the thoughts that come across. And so it's like, oh, we did the youth and the youth did this, as opposed to seeing the youth presence cross-cutting. And I think when we talk about meaningful change, when we talk about intergenerational change, when we talk about this exchange of knowledge, whether it's from the wisdom holders who are much older or from the younger people who have different perspective, it has to be co-created, it has to be collective, and I think there's room for a lot of improvement, not to mention there has to be succession planning. You know, we have to ensure that youth are having this experience, whether it's through their delegates, whether it's as observers, or through the civil society arm, so that by the time that the generation transitions, you have people who are fully prepared and really know the in and out of the space.
Thank you very much. And I love the phrase, "we did the youth." It's so indicative of how so many organizations approach engaging youth. Exactly, yeah. It's just a tick box sometimes. But that definitely is changing, I think. Yeah, you're right. And Georgette, your opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the need to have, as I mentioned earlier, that youth are there from the inception of a project all the way through to its delivery, and that can take part in, for example, any knowledge generated or experiences gained. But in terms of specifically at this COP, what I can speak to is the barriers that I've witnessed, I've heard about, and that have been reported. For example, the financial barrier because then we need to ask which youth are here, which youth could come, and the financial barrier of being able to travel to Glasgow, the fact that the restrictions as a result of the pandemic have shown the disparity in vaccine distribution and how that has impacted who has been able to be, again, in the room. The accessibility of the venue, both physically for people that have varying needs for accessing a venue, and also how there's been activists of colour have been reporting how they've been treated differently by, for example, security here. So I think think we also need to ask, once we talk about youth participation, but which youth are here, and are all youth being represented, and more importantly, are the youth that need to be given a voice, are they here, or are other youth which may be easier to access and easier to bring in, are they here instead?
That's a very good point. And I think your experience as a youth empowerment focal point with Siri comes through there. It's very, very, a very important point that you make. And I think it calls back to the Fridays for Future outside, the other voices in the diverse group that is youth that we should also be listening to. Now, I'm going to mix things up a little bit. We've only got 5 or 10 minutes left before we jump into some audience discussions moderated by David once again. So I'm going to go straight to Nikita first, if that's all right, and we'll mix up the order. Based on, actually, the reason I wanted to bring this up with you, Nikita, is Georgette just mentioned the financial gap that affects many young people when engaging in these kinds of discussions at COP26. You actually have a number of quite, well, successful youth and young youth-run organizations operating out of the Bahamas. What has it been like for you, or what's your experience in accessing funds and building capacity to finance yourselves as an organization? And maybe you can introduce your organization a little bit as well, but do keep things short.
Sure. Thank you. I think this is an excellent question. I am the founder and CEO of YME, Young Marine Explorers, and the Cat Island Conservation Institute. And a lot of the work that I do focuses on driving community-driven conservation, engaging youth and all community members in building and co-creating climate-resilient communities. And I would have to say one of the greatest challenges to building climate resilient communities is true equitable access to financing for youth-led driven projects, but also community, local community, indigenous peoples projects. And I say this because I am really good at getting unsustainable financing. I can get the $5,000, $20,000 grants, no problem, but that does not get us where we need to go. That is not what a sustainable finance project looks like, and that is not that is the antithesis of sustainability. And so when we talk about true climate action, when we talk about really what does it take to build climate resilient communities, we need to ensure that real financing, long-term million-dollar financing is accessible to youth-led projects, to local community-based projects, to projects for indigenous peoples, because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. And at the end of the day, what it took for me, and I am someone who has access as a UNESCO partner, I was able to reach out to my colleagues at UNESCO to facilitate me coming up here, but as was previously mentioned, it's extremely difficult for young people from local remote communities like myself to get into the space, and this is just where maybe our voice will be heard, let alone what does it take to actually do the work. And so if we want to do one thing that is going to transform our world, we need to ensure that the people who need the money get the money, and that the bureaucracy that prevents them from accessing the money is dealt with. And that may mean ensuring that there's mentorship and or support so that the actual accounting mechanisms can take place. But we have to eliminate these gatekeepers to financing and just giving tokenistic, oh, here's $20,000, have fun, because that doesn't solve our problems.
Absolutely, and that really ties in well to what I wanted to ask John next. I'm sure you know what I'm going to ask you, John. You have quite some experience in finance and currently work with the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and you've also had quite some experience in the past working with young people. What is your experience from the flip side of what Nikita was explaining in how young people can best access sustainable finance and finance the projects they want to make change with?
I think the first issue is that when we think about the large sums of money that Nikita was talking about, they're held by either development partners, development banks, or the private sector. And the problem for them is they are just not geared up to grant funding or even lending into young people. It's just not part of their makeup. And part of the reason is because they would straight away say, well, you have no financial track record. Where's your due diligence? Can we trust
It's too
you?
risky.
Too risky. So that's challenge number one. But I was really heartened by the the videos we've just seen. They're probably some of the most important videos I've seen so far at COP. And the Global Water Partnership does a great job in accessing the funds from the large players, but then being able to disperse them down. But really what those videos showed, and listening to Nikita as well, is a group of highly motivated entrepreneurs who see an issue, work out a solution, have got brilliant project management skills, and they deliver. There were people in that slide there, in those presentations, if they came to me and I had opportunity to offer them jobs, I'd give them more jobs, because they have more knowledge and more ability about delivering projects than most big businesses and most governments I ever go and work with. So I think the key is for young people to really think about developing entrepreneurial skills.
Brilliant. And that capacity building is really important. So maybe we can step away from a purely financial focus and talk more widely about capacity building. And Georgette, your role in youth empowerment. What lessons have you learned in your role, and what advice do you have around that area for capacity building in young people?
Well, I think that I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I think that capacity building is a step in the process, and I think that we have to be careful that we avoid one-way transfer of information and experience. It needs to be a democratic process from the start. It needs to be all knowledge needs to be valued and included. For example, we have the Stockholm Junior Water Prize has since 1997 been choosing an international winner who has quite literally invented a solution for a water problem that they've experienced locally. So touching on also what John was saying about that, those expertise are there, that knowledge is there, and we need to start embracing that and seeing it as an ongoing process, because it's not just about partly it's about giving people their human right to participation in these decisions that are affecting them, as you said, Nikita, today, and not just in 2050 or 2030, but also about results. If we want a sustainable outcome for projects, we need the process of being inclusive, and that includes this democratic exchange of knowledge, and part of that is capacity building, but a big part of that is also listening. So I think that's what I would say, is that we need to listen, we need to include, it needs to be part of the entire process, and we need we don't want to include youth because they're the youth, we need to stop excluding them because they are youth. So we need to look at them as the experts, so the knowledge bearers, people with perhaps they have indigenous knowledge, perhaps they have practitioner knowledge, and we need to view them in their role as that, and look at how we can exchange information and build each other's capacity in that sense, for it to be a truly empowered process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Georgette. And I think we'll close on those words. I'm sorry I didn't have time to come back to you. Hello? Oh, I lost the audio for a second there. But thank you very much for your input. And I really appreciated the really stark reminder you gave us of the climate anxiety that so many young people face. And I think we've had a big reminder here of just how much motivation there is among young people to take action and make real change in climate and water. Now I'll pass things back off to David to have a bit of an audience Q&A. So, David, where you go?
Thank you, Alex. Can I have an indicator of how much time we have before we have to give way to the next session, please? We have 7 minutes. So thank you, Alex, and prior to you, thank you to Rihanna. I am looking for hands in the physical audience here. For those who can pose questions, keep them relatively brief, please, and we'll ask our panel to engage. If you could introduce yourself, sir, your hand was up.
My name is Kingsley, and I'm a PhD student at University of Huddersfield. First of all, I'm doing water treatment, waste treatment. I must say, some young people are actually energetic and they want to be part of the process, but they don't have the platform. First of all, getting in touch with the World Youth Parliament, it's a problem. I've been sending mails and no response. And you showed a project carried out in Ghana. I have done that personally with my funds. So we have the passion, we want to do this, but we don't have the access. So I think if you're talking about more youth participation, you have to create the access for us to come in I'm from Nigeria and I'm willing to work. Thank you.
Perhaps we could have a reaction from the panel in your usual order, Alex.
Sure, go ahead. John, in terms of having that capacity among young organizations to actually...
I mean, young people have the core skills. You know, we've seen that there on those videos. But you're absolutely right. If other organizations don't give you the access and the platforms, then they're just always going to be small projects in a local village, in a local issue. And what we need to do is start connecting this up. So you're absolutely right. Now, I don't quite know how that platform can be provided, but I'm quite happy to have a chat with other people to think, what could we do about that?
Absolutely. Hasmik?
First of all, thank you for your active involvement in water topic and the activities that you carry out in your community. On behalf of the European Youth Parliament for Water and World Youth Parliament for Water, I can just motivate you, to encourage you to be more, to follow the activities, because we have also several platforms, especially for funding youth projects. For one of them is Youth for Water and Climate platform, and otherwise the International Secretariat for Water, several times during the year they launch the call for funding the projects in all over the world, especially projects that are carried out by youth. So from our side, there are several opportunities, and we tried to do in a way that there are more and more opportunities for funding for youth projects. Yeah, thank you for raising this issue.
Go ahead, Nikita.
Sure. I think the point that was brought up is very relevant. You know, one of the greatest challenges is access, and I have found that I think it's persistence that we as individual young people have to just be diligent and persistent and network until we gain that access. Unfortunately, I can only speak from my experience, but this is what I've had to do as I've been navigating my channels into gaining access to a platform. I definitely think that the responsibility also lies for those of us who do have access to a platform to be able to see how we can make it easier and we can expand this space so we can create more opportunities for more diversity of voices.
Brilliant. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree. And I think another thing that we can do to ensure that these platforms are as accessible as possible is to make space when we feel that maybe a platform or a specific, even maybe funding might not, there could be others that could need it more, that maybe don't know about it, to look at sharing that, to giving up one seat on a panel, or if you're sitting in a meeting and you look around the room and you see who's there and think, that is there someone missing, and being active in finding those gaps and addressing them. And that's why we have youth environment champions throughout the departments at SUI, so they can find these gaps in the specific fields that they are working in and look at how we can increase that access. And of course, the Stockholm Junior Water Prize being an international competition, there are national organisers that organise in their country, because they know best how to make a platform accessible. They know which tools that the young people in their countries need, and thankfully, up until of course a couple of years ago, it's also led to all of these kids coming from over 30 countries around the world to Stockholm and creating their own network. That we've given them this chance to meet one another, and they can share what they've learned about water issues, and maybe they can find common solutions to water issues that are occurring across the world. So I think this is something that's an extremely active question. It's an extremely active issue, and it's one that we cannot stop working on addressing until it is completely and fully addressed.
What a super interesting session. I am hoping that some of our panelists will be around for a little while after we wind up, but I am being given the sign that we need to make room for the next cohort of participants using the first ever water pavilion in the Blue Zone. Thank you so much to the panelists and the facilitators, the panelists who have been here physically today in Glasgow. Enjoy the rest of your couple of weeks here. It's a wonderful city. And also to those participating remotely. This was inspiring stuff. I thank everyone who's made the time to come along today, and we'll close. Stay tuned to other events at the Water Pavilion for the rest of this week and next week.